first roll of business is, oh, I thought we were live streaming already. Sorry. Just called the meeting to order of the Subcommittee on Racial and Other Profiling Disparities. Welcome to folks watching on live stream. I will begin the agenda with a roll call of our members and just take roll real quick. I'll call out the names, not in any particular order, and just invite folks to say they are here. So Task Force Member Horton.
Present.
Task Force Member Banner. I do not see. Task Force Member Krigler.
Present.
Task Force Member Rivera.
Here.
Task Force Member Blaylark.
Here at City Hall.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. Both on the committee and today in City Hall. Appreciate it. And Task Force Member Battles indicated in a note that he would not be here. Okay. And I do want to acknowledge Deputy Chief Schuessler. Hello, Deputy Chief. And we have Council Member Powell also joining us with I saw her hand wave or applaud earlier. Hello. And Task Force Member Haben, who's observing from another subcommittee.
From afar. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Denise. All right. Great to see everyone tonight. We are going to just give a quick opportunity to review the minutes, which are distributed in your invite, the minutes from the February 7th meeting. Just have a quick moment to look those over. Hopefully you had a chance to look them over already. And when so moved to do so, a task force member would need to motion to approve.
So moved.
All right, thank you, Horton. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Blaylark. All right, let's do a roll call vote real quick on the approval of those. So that is a Task Force Member Horton. A yay or nay on approval of minutes?
So approved. Yay.
Krigler,
Yay.
Rivera,
Yay.
Blaylark.
I have to abstain. I have not had opportunity to look at them. I put them off and forgot to do it. So I'd have to abstain in case y'all have made a gross mistake that I don't know about.
That is absolutely your right to do so.
Thank you.
So that puts us in an interesting situation. We have 3 votes yay, 1 abstain. Technically 3 for this subcommittee would be a quorum. Based off of that vote, it would pass. The meeting minutes would pass.
Great.
Okay. I hear no objections from anyone who voted or moved to vote from that. All right. So we have that business out of the way. Now we have Task Force Member Blaylark, who volunteered to be in City Hall today so that we are in alignment with the Illinois Open Meetings Act. Yay, thank you, sir. Are there any members of the public there who would like to make a comment?
No members of the public is here.
Okay. All right. Maybe someday soon we will find ourselves where we're past this moment and we see some folks showing up there to express comment. Okay. All right. With that, I'm going to turn to the single agenda item for this particular meeting. We've spent the last 3 meetings. This is the 4th meeting of this body We spent the last 3 meetings reviewing resources, discussing ideas related to recommendations, doing a little bit of homework here and there, hearing from Deputy Chief Schuessler, who's graciously answered a lot of questions from this group. So I was hoping we could spend the bulk of the time today discussing ideas that have either been shared or presented already, or ideas that people have that are new or not shared, but getting us down to putting things down on paper. I have a short PowerPoint just to review the specifics. I went back through our minutes, the ideas that were discussed in meetings, and put on some slides here the ideas that were formulated kind of well enough to start to congeal into an idea. So I'm going to do that in just a moment here. Let me share my screen. All right. Okay. Hopefully everyone is seeing a slide that just has a title on it, Subcommittee in today's date. All right, great. So the goal for today's meeting is as best we can decide on, if we can get to that, that'd be great. At least decide on priorities maybe. And begin to draft recommendations if we get that far as well. Hopefully we can at least prioritize, if not get consensus agreement from the group on ideas that you would all like to start shaping into a recommendation. As we've been discussing the last 2 meetings, the ideas we've discussed and reviewed from either the literature or from discussions that have, ideas that have come up from the group fall into 3 categories and these again are recommendations regarding reducing racial and other profiling. Training, strategies to reduce the number of stops, and strategies to build mutual trust between police and community. So just because a category is up here doesn't mean that we are indicating that Elgin Police Department is not doing anything already in this particular category or space. This is just the category, this is how they, the groups fell into different categories. So things that we either discussed or heard mentioned, either from strategies that Deputy Schuessler already mentioned, or from ideas that came up from the group, or from materials we read and discussed. Implicit bias training, which is currently in place by EPD on the way in, and also with some frequency for current officers. Other types of training, this came out of the research, in particular the COPS evaluation, the COPS, which is a publication from the Department of Justice that had a number of case studies of strategies to reduce racial profiling. And there were several strategies in there that, of course, implicit bias training was the main focus, but of a lot of the training oriented ones. But simulation and scenario-based training to put officers in situations and see how they react and point out opportunities to point out where bias may or may not play a role. It's very different to read something on paper than it is to actually be role play or be put in that situation. And then community input and involvement of or awareness of training policies and practices. It's kind of a catch-all for essentially involving the community in training in some way, shape, or form. And there was a wide array of that in the research, but from what I can tell for you all's questions and interaction with Deputy Schuessler, there is some awareness, but there were still questions about how certain practices, how certain decisions are made about training curricula, the consultants who were hired, and the frequency and so on. So there's a lot there, EPD is doing a lot already on this issue around training, but there's a lot that could be expanded on, explored, or improved. Reducing stops. This is just kind of a single strategy. Well, I'll say maybe a dual strategy category. The first one was interest in this ordinance out of Philadelphia where minor infractions are banned as the only reason for a stop. A resident can be cited for those minor infractions if they are stopped for a serious moving violation or something of that nature. But I'll go through the details of this when I go over some suggested recommendations that I pull together. But essentially, for these minor things, they are banning. Police are not allowed to stop for those as the only reason. And then another idea that came out of the literature, and Pastor Blaylock, and remember you had a lot of interest in this one, possibly limiting the scope of discretion that officers use to develop suspicion for stops, or in particular, escalation to searches or other enforcement actions. One source in particular cited an effort out of the U.S. Customs Office that had at one point some 43 different factors that their officers were sort of trained to kind of get their radar up and trigger a suspicion enough to trigger an enforcement action. And what they found was when that was reduced from 43 to 6, fewer searches happened, but they were much more effective in yielding contraband. So that gives us a little bit of insight into the fact that it is possible to have some very clear, within the guidelines of good policing practice, to have some narrowing of that discretion. Essentially, my guess is a lot of those 43, even though we haven't seen the full list, were probably vaguely written or poorly written and allowed officers a lot of leeway for their implicit bias to creep in. And so when you have that tightening and that clarity, it really does make it harder for that implicit bias to creep in. And then finally, building trust, regular and ongoing dialogues between community members themselves and separate opportunities, regarding reducing profiling, and separate opportunities for dialogue together with officers. Both seemed important. In my experience and from what we heard from this group, you get different people have different levels of comfort engaging with officers. And if you really want your dialogues and your engagement to truly reflect the full span, everybody's calling me right now, the full span of viewpoints in your community, and not have all voices, and not have voices that get forgotten about, you really want to make sure that you have both kinds of dialogues going on, and that they are robust and meaningful. That seems to be the key. Opportunities for community input and strategies intended to reduce profiling. We heard about a lot of the different things that Deputy Schussler talked about that are already going on. But if there is going to be an effort, a concerted, intentional, clear effort to reduce profiling, what's clear in the case studies is that there was some strong level of community involvement in those, whether it was a steering committee or a group like this, or feedback from leadership in the community in some way. There was always an element of that. And then this last one, it was a way to capture some of the ideas. Oh, that second bullet, I apologize, didn't get finished. Is a way to capture some of the ideas that came out of our discussions. And that first bullet is about, I know Task Force Member Krigler, you mentioned these situations, and maybe Blaylark, you mentioned them as well. These situations where a lot of folks find themselves in where they have a fine and things escalate with that. They either don't show up at court, or they delay in paying it, or fail to take one action or another that causes the fine to compound and increase. And then the next thing you know, it's something they can't possibly afford to get their car out of the impound. And you know, that is, it seems, when you think about how it plays out, it does seem kind of ridiculous, right? In that a minor thing could turn into a major challenge in somebody's life. All of a sudden, you don't have a vehicle to get to work, to pick up your kids, or to do whatever, or you got to buy another one, right? Maybe you can't even do that because you still got this other unpaid thing kind of hanging over your legal situation. So that seems to be something we should consider here, if there's a way to do so. And then the second one was opportunities for alternatives to paying. And I think Task Force Member Rivera, you had mentioned ideas around that. And I'm sorry that didn't actually get on the slide, because those are really cool ideas. But, you know, you could mention them now, or just say out loud, you know, some of the alternatives were, I think, doing community service,
Yeah.
or other kinds of alternatives to fines. I don't know. Did I leave anything out?
So yes, close to it. But, you know, connect them with some of our partnerships, create volunteer opportunities in lieu of, say, $160 fine. And also what I had suggested was a once a year grace ticket. You know, like if it's, you know, once a year, you know, you connect with these volunteer opportunities, that fee is waived entirely.
Got it.
That was the other one.
So it was grace and waiving
Once a year, and then
volunteer.
and that it like goes hand in hand. It's not just waive the fee, but there has to be a volunteer opportunity connected with that.
Got it. Thank you. So I think this category around reducing the barriers and impacts, particularly on African American and Latino communities, if there are alternatives to the enforcement action, it creates another way for somebody to deal with it. Yes, Task Force Member Krigler, see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when we're saying for them to volunteer, you know, I see a lot of or some of the volunteering that is usually that are the African Americans or Latinos usually get, whether, you know, cleaning up along the road or that kind of stuff. And for me, I'm just thinking that in regards to that, you know, these people have jobs. Hopefully some of them will have jobs. And I'm just wondering, when we're asking them to volunteer, you know, is this going to be for all communities, or is this just going to be just in regards to the African American and Latino communities? Because that then in itself too then becomes another issue for me. You know, I see what you're getting at, you know, and I see what you're trying to do in regards to eliminating it. But I believe we're more trying to, or should be trying to address of it happening overall, you know. So I don't want to, like, you know, go from one thing and then, you know, go to another.
Right.
So that's my concern in regards to that we're just giving them another way to impact the community unjustly. And I don't agree with that. So.
Yeah, no, I understand your concerns completely. And it was the side of the road was something absolutely not. That is not something I wanted. And it would be available to the entire community. But what my vision is to connect them more with the community engagement programs that are already in existence. So, and it could be something like, you know, even attending a city council meeting and offer feedback, or something along that line that just connects them more to the community. And not something that's degrading or, or a form of punishment in that sense, but something that really weaves them more into the community. And it wouldn't just be whoever takes advantage of it, it would be their choice. It doesn't have to be just people of color. It could be for anyone who would like to have an alternative. And some might just want to pay the fine, so that was my approach to that.
Mhm. Okay, well, I guess my initial, thinking is we're trying to eliminate, the infractions as much as we possibly can, because what we're really saying is a lot of them are being given unjustly, and unfairly, in regards to other communities. So, I don't, like I said, I don't want to go from one to another,
Oh, yes, I
we're
definitely.
trying to limit it, as much as we possibly can of it being done at all,
That's ideal, absolutely. But this
yeah.
would be infractions that people are guilty of, that it's, that's what I'm referring to. And I definitely see where you're coming from with, that is the ultimate goal.
Right. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
I think there'll be a chance to flesh out ideas for that. What I was trying to do was give it a name, that for that category. We can deliberate on what the specific ideas are that are most appropriate, I guess you could say, most effective in that situation. And Task Force Member Krigler, one of the things that I was struck by when you were asking the question about where this would be, would this service be in an African American community? And I think one thing that we started out this conversation with was the recognition of the harm to the African American community in particular, but also the Latino community of this profiling and the history of it, and how it persists in the data. Now we see that it's a fact. So I was just like a little light bulb went off in my head in like, because that's something I didn't reflect here in my comments on it. Framing it is in whatever the alternatives are, making sure there are ways to build back that connection to that historical harm. So that's what we heard from Building Trust. So what I did was I tried to start helping us frame our conversation and get into the kind of discussion, Jewel, that you and Cynthia just got into about, well, I like this part of it, but this part concerns me or whatever, right? About these ideas that we've discussed, or to just say, that sounds like an interesting idea, but that's not, in my opinion, a priority right now. We should focus on this other one or whatever, right? So in order to help us start getting some things on paper, here I framed some suggestions that we could start with. These are just suggestions. The Philadelphia minor infractions ordinance, that would be very much sort of modeling theirs. Now, you can't exactly model, you can't just take something and just start doing it here, right? Because we have our own laws. And the ordinance in Philadelphia makes reference to certain categories of types of infractions. And that's built into their state law. And so it was easy for them to make reference to that, category 1, category 2, whatever. We would want here in this case to have a similar conversation about like what constitutes minor, right? Infraction. And so here's an opportunity, if we decided we were going to do that, put forth this one as a recommendation, that would be an opportunity for something to deliberate on and to look into. I just put here what I know is in the Philadelphia one, which is registration infraction within 60 days of expiration. So if it's 2 months past, if you're within 2 months past your expiration, that alone cannot be the reason for your stop. The location of registration and license plate, if still clearly visible. Again, if it's in the back window, if it's attached in some way but visible. Again, this would need to be consistent with Illinois law, right? Excuse me, whatever the laws are on that visibility, if that's going to be something that's in the ordinance. Single light bulb infractions, pretty self-explanatory, rear or headlight. Bumpers, I'm just not sure what that meant. The language in the Philadelphia one just said bumpers, and I don't, whether you have bumpers or not, it wasn't clear to me. And then lack of smog check or safety check. But that gives you a sense of the ideas of the infractions in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, I did look into trying to learn a little bit more about how this has been working, particularly around accountability of officers, and because this was a concern you all raised loudly here, that, you know, we can't just put stuff on paper. What happens when officers aren't enforcing it or ignoring it or taking advantage of people's ignorance of that particular law and just kind of doing it? And unfortunately, this is just too new. There was a stay of 120 days put into effect. So this just started into effect on February 12th by my calculation. I don't have a confirmation of it, but at least of the day of the news story, that would have been about 120 days. So we're looking at it just kind of starting. So we're not going to have that kind of information yet about, you know, how effective it is, have things gone down, examples of whether officers are taking it up, following it or not. From what I know in terms of, and Deputy Chief, you could speak to this too, these kinds of things that there would have to be, and this is probably the reason for the 120-day stay before it went into effect, there would have to be time for the police department to develop appropriate internal policies related to this law. And that would include, I presume, disciplinary policies, if this is being followed or not followed. And it can be as simple as adding it to a list of things that are within the purview of oversight of a supervising officer or not, but I don't really know. So Task Force Member Rivera, your hand is up.
Thank you, Joe. I just have a question. I want to make sure I correctly understand this. So for instance, if there's a driver who has a single light bulb that's out, like a tail light is out, but they're also swerving on the road, which may indicate intoxication, they're still able to be pulled over, and therefore, you know, they go through the full stop procedures, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The ordinance does say, whatever the reference is, it says category 2 infractions or above.
Oh, right. Okay.
Anything in those can be, this law does not affect that, the ability of an officer to stop for those infractions.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
yes, it's just that these cannot be the sole reason.
I see. Okay. Thank you for that.
Mhm. Deputy Chief, did you want to comment on that? I'm sorry, I can't see everybody's screen while I have mine up.
Joe, yeah, you hit it. There would be an internal component with training. There would be policy revisions, most likely, with something like this. There would be a component that involves community, basically passing the information on the community, and there would also be the third component, which would be working with the state's attorney's office or the adjudication office to make sure that they understand what the ordinance is and how it works. And if they do see, to the point, if they see these tickets being written, then what is the notification process and how does that work?
Great, thanks. So that's one suggestion. I'm going to go through 3 suggestions, then I'm going to stop talking and you guys have the floor. The second suggestion was a way to pull together a lot of different ideas that you all suggested. And so I just made up a title here. I just said an integrated reducing racial and other profiling training institute. What is that? What does that mean? Well, it would be a concerted, intentional effort through a collaboration between Elgin Police Department and the community to reduce profiling using the numbers that I presented in week 1 around how do we know racial profiling is happening. And we have that data from the state because Elgin Police Department officers have to fill out that card and submit it after a stop. So if the goal is to reduce it through a positive, affirmative, whatever intentional effort, what might that look like if it were integrated truly with community and police? So an important piece, again, drawing from the case studies, would be an ongoing community advisory group. It could be an existing body. It could be a body like this. It could be something EPD has already. But whatever it is, their responsibility would be to provide input on the training curriculum, the frequency of that, the accountability standards, the updating of that training, and the training of consultants. I'm sorry, and not training of consultants, but the consultants who are providing training and weighing in on standards for them or who they are or how they're selected or whatever. So you'd have that group or that body in place as a key part of this. The second component, and Councilmember Powell, I see your hand. Was this about this first one or the whole idea in general?
No, go ahead and finish. It's about
Okay,
this
I'll just-
slide.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
finish this. The second is for the things that EPD, the trainings that are already happening, this would maintain those intact for the time being. But, everything is reviewable and updatable and, should be looked at closely. Right now, this group is not going through every single step of training with a fine-tooth comb. Maybe that's happening in the training subcommittee. But the bias training and the other trainings, at least on day 1, that are already going on related to this, would be a part of what this effort would be overseeing and contributing to. And then third role would be managing this institute could manage a regular feedback loop from the community officers and administrators on the effectiveness of training and implementation through dialogues and focus groups. I'm suggesting twice a year, but I'm just throwing that out there. It doesn't have to be the way it's done. And so this is really to get at some of the, just thinking about the conversations we had early on. Pastor Blaylark, you asked about these safety checks, where they're happening, why are they happening, are they still happening? That kind of awareness that something's going on, but ability to connect it with what we know is actually happening, creating a vehicle for that to happen, a space where that happens on a regular basis, and not just in a task force like this one that pops up, occasionally or when there's a need. There's something institutionalized. So those were the 3 kind of key things that I was starting with. But if this idea had merit, you all could flush this out in a lot more detail. Councilmember Powell, your question.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for organizing this like this. I think it helps for discussion purposes. I guess my question, from as a academic, from the academic perspective, are there any studies, any new information out there that could help in this area? And I say this because sometimes I feel like we go down a rabbit hole around, we need more training. The officers need more training around racial profiling and bias. My question is there anything out there that shows it's more an issue of training or is it more just an issue of accountability? Because you can pour a whole lot of money and time into training, and if people are still behaving and acting in ways that are not following policies and procedures and are contrary to the training that is being provided, then that needs to be dealt with. And that's an accountability issue versus a training issue. And I guess what I was looking for is there any best practices out there that shows that this is a training issue versus another issue, just not holding people accountable?
I get your point on that. And I guess maybe my perspective on this is framed a little bit by my work on the monitoring team in Chicago around the consent decree. And there's different levels of compliance with the consent decree. And this applies to the training component of it, which is massive too. There's a whole lot of things that the Chicago Police Department has to do. The monitor, though, as far as how they evaluate whether something is effective, right? There's first of all, the consent decree says Chicago Police Department will do X. So the first thing is, are they doing X, right? With regard to training. Second thing is, so officers got the training. Yes. Okay, great. They've met that. But it doesn't stop there. So you can start with training. You can link training to an accountability thread. So you start with training, and then it's, okay, somebody is looking at the extent to which the officers are applying that training, that particular training. Are they doing this practice? And whatever the measure is associated with that. And then the third is more about the quality of it. To what extent is that application achieving the aim of why that training goal was set? So without getting into, there's two parts to your question. The first is really about, do we know the training? What's the extent to which research knows that training makes the difference in profiling? And I don't have necessarily the full answer on that, because the things that we read talked about a lot of things. They talked about training, accountability, and culture. So your sense of it seems to be in line with that, that there's other things that matter too. But you can start with training and connect it to an accountability thread, in terms of whether the training is being implemented, and achieving its aim. And that accountability thread may be a different kind of accountability, in the sense that, like, oh, this officer's doing it or this one isn't. And so there's whatever disciplinary or corrective measures there. But there's also the part which you're hinting at, which is this training making the difference? Right. And so you can connect it, right? But the question, it's a little further down the line than the actual training delivery itself. And so I don't know, that I feel like that might be a part of a space where this subcommittee needs to liaise with the accountability one on this particular issue, the civilian review, or whether it's picked up in the training, retention, and hiring.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Hope that helped. Yeah, go ahead, Pastor Blaylock.
I'd just like to piggyback on, let me see if I'm muted. I like to just piggyback on what Councilman Powell said. And I think she was very nice in what she said. I think it was accountability. I think that we get enough training. It's accountability. And let me say this, and I hope the deputy chief hear this. If in fact you have sergeants and you have what they call it, the foul, what do they call it? We used to call it when I worked for the city, the rank and file. If you have the rank and file with an attitude, hey, we're gonna let you do what you want. We've been doing it. Stop these people, specifically people of color. The lights tell us all do what they're doing because, hey, we suspect that there's some that they may be driving dirty. And let's check them out. If that is happening, and most likely it is, then that's what you're getting, accountability. So it's totally accountability. Training, these people are trained. I was just reading the minutes. I forgot that I had my Z Fold phone and I could go back and get what I didn't file. I was just looking at some of these things that implicit bias, they said they're trained in. They said they're trained on there's a whole lot of things that the deputy chief said they're trained in. However, if these people are not being accountable, then their discretion is off the track when it comes to people of color. And that's what's been happening. As I said, I'm stopped every other year in Elgin about something, every other year. It is totally racial profiling. I should never be stopped. Some of the stuff I'm stopped for. Okay, we'll let the phone go this year, but last year and 2 other years, it was stupid stuff. One time a guy stopped me from, not putting my signal 100 feet before I get to I was on Ann Street. I guess he figured that, there was a lot of traffic activity going on, drug activity. Well, there was nothing going on that particular time. Because they done ran all the drug pushers and all the bad people away from here. They up in Rockford, they're in jail, everywhere else, especially black people. And most of our Latin brothers have done the same thing. So, it's just totally, to me, it's just total harassment. And it should stop. And I get it too from church members that they've been stopped for just crazy stuff. It needs to stop. It needs accountability. It's still going on. It ain't just happening in the past. It's still going on. The police department, some of these police officers need to change their attitude because the black people, and I'm pretty sure, my brown brothers, Latin brothers get tired of it too. It's just some stuff is just stupid that we've been stopped. They do not do anybody else like this. I have white parishioners. They're just shocked. When I talk to white citizens in Elgin, they're just shocked to read some of the stupid stuff that we're stopped for. So it needs to stop. It needs to be accountability from the top down to the bottom, to the city manager, to council members. They need to know that we're really fed up with it. And that's when I got on this committee. And we can keep on being cute about it, but it's accountability. And so, and that should be strong. It should be, and let me say that it should be said too in the council meeting. It should be said in the city police office, the chief on down, that this needs to stop. You get these officers who stopping people for no reason. And let me tell you, and how many, and then I want to know this from Deputy Chief, how many white folks get stopped for this? This little stupid stuff that I get stopped for. I just really want to know, give me some statistics. Then I say I would publicly apologize. Just don't believe they've been stopped. Because most of my white parishioners say they'll never stop for stuff I'm stopped for.
Thank you, Pastor Blaylock. There was a question in there. I don't know if Deputy Chief, if you wanted to respond to that. I'm familiar with the data too, so I can respond to, but go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if I specifically answer that on the spot. The information that we provide to the Department of Transportation and the annual stop cards that we give shows the breakdown regarding race of the stops that we make. That's high level views of statistics. We're not getting into neighborhoods and areas with that. And also to speak to Councilwoman Powell's comments, training is just one part of it. It's culture. And I think that also is something that Pastor Blaylock alluded to, that It's accountability. It's what we allow. It's what we, not just from supervisory ranks, but from peers. That's why we're looking at other training like ABLE training through Georgetown Law, active bystander bystandership for law enforcement. It's building that culture. It's knowing what's acceptable, knowing what's right. To your slide here, how are ways that we can integrate that additional training, that additional messaging, especially from the community members into officers' understanding of the situation. And doing all those things in conjunction with each other, I think, is what pushes us in the right direction.
And Deputy Chief, I know there's a study, unfortunately, it's not wrapped up yet. This particular subcommittee doesn't have the results of the study yet. But there is a study being done on racial profiling by the I'm sorry, the name escapes me, the Institute for
Center for Police Equity.
Yeah. Is there any update on when that study is going to be done?
I believe we have our next meeting with them in March to go over data. So that's our next opportunity where we're going to have some information to share.
Is it possible that the question that Pastor Blaylock asked is it going to be touched in that report?
I can't speak to that without knowing what the final report's going to look like. I just know that our next step process is going to be March meeting with them, early March, I believe.
Okay. Task Force Member Haben, I see your hand. Sorry.
No, and I'll be very brief. I just wanted to let folks on this subcommittee know that following the last meeting for this committee, we had our Citizens Review Board, a Civilian Review Board meeting, and I made a recommendation around this whole issue around accountability, that could be one of the powers and duties of the CRB. And so that was it.
Thank you, Denise. That's actually a question I was going to ask from anybody who's on that subcommittee, to just share kind of how far accountability drifted into the conversations around accountability in that subcommittee drifted onto this issue or covered it at all.
It was specific. I made the specific recommendation.
Okay, great.
I think, and so we're not, so it's out there. It will be discussed at, I think, we meet again tomorrow. So it's there as a recommendation.
Thank you, Denise. One of the next steps after our discussion today is that on the cycle that we're on, there will be I expect there will be a full task force meeting. And so what it's looking like is shaping up for that meeting is discussions from each of the subcommittees around their ideas so that the full subcommittee can hear them, and possibly ask each other questions about, how better to crosswalk and integrate. So looking forward to that. And I think this issue is a good one to bring to that meeting. Task Force Member Krigler, go ahead. See your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of piggyback on Tish's and Walter's comments. And I can tell you that I'm back here on this back end of Route 20 in Nestler quite often. And I rarely see police officers back there, to where I see a lot on the east side, to where I don't even like to go on the east side of Elgin, because you do have a lot more police officers that are just up and down those areas. So, I mean, that is something that is, it's quite clear, of what you're seeing there. And it is quite questionable as to why. Because last time I checked, criminals come in all colors. And as it has been stated in many documentations, that you're finding that there are larger amounts of whites that actually have contraband than Hispanic or Black. So, why is it a continuation then that, there's always that presence of the police officers? And I don't like that thing of, being friendly, we're just being your friendly officers. It's cool. I know you. Okay. I see you and I'm going to be respectful towards you, but always being in my community, I just don't see that. I don't see that as a comfortability. It's not making me feel comfortable in regards to my children or anything like that, just because the police are in the community. Actually, I don't want my children seeing you all the time. That makes me feel a lot more comfortable that our community is, a good community that we're living in, so that's one of the things that I definitely want to address. Also, I don't know if you all know, what is the smog thing that we were talking about, or that you, I believe, had listed in reference to the cars?
Oh, that was emissions testing.
The
That's
emissions
we
testing.
call
Okay,
it
that's
emissions testing. here.
That's what I was trying to get to. And I don't know if you all know that this is not a complete Illinois thing, because in unincorporated areas within Illinois, they don't have to do that testing, and I was quite shocked at that. So it's only seeming to be the inner, if you want to say the rural, the areas where the Black and brown are. Then the outer areas, and most whites are moving out or living in the unincorporated areas. So that's another thing that, and I actually found that out through a friend of mine who happens to be white. I had no idea, so that's another thing that needs to be challenged and questioned, because if you're not doing that with their cars, why are you always doing that with our cars? And our cars ain't always old, nowhere near, So that's another question that I wanted to put out there as well, and give knowledge to that existing. So, okay.
Thanks, Jewel, for that.
Thank you.
Cynthia, I see your hand.
Thank you. I also wanted to piggyback off of what Tish and Walter were talking about regarding accountability. And I want to make sure I understand the whole process of when a complaint comes in. There's, the EPD, they handle the internal and external complaints. For the Civilian Review Board, is that same complaint, are they able to review it simultaneously, or is there another avenue that the Civilian Review Board is receiving these complaints? Or how, I guess I'm just looking for another type of platform that would give citizens, the options to report, even if it's not directly with EPD. Is there a channel that would allow them to, speak, have a voice about certain complaints that they have? Or is it strictly where's the Civilian Review Board getting their information and complaints to review?
Well, from what I know of, we're still reviewing that right now. So we haven't put everything together. We're going through the same phase of what you all are going through, what we're going through at this point, of making that decisions of exactly how, and even to my understanding, there has been put on the table for us to actually possibly stay in place, the group that we have, to be part of that, what do you want to call it? That group that kind of works with the Civilian Board, almost like a double check. So it's still things being worked out. It still is not nowhere near to where we can totally answer all of that. Denise, you may have some things you want to add.
Yeah, there is no Civilian Review Board yet. So that's why this task force is meeting. And, to back up what Kelly said, we have several recommendations that we're working through. And hopefully, as we keep chipping away, we'll be able to bring recommendations to the next full task force meeting. But yeah, there is no Civilian Review Board, so so we can't answer that question.
Okay, I'm just wondering, like, if there's someone who makes a complaint, but doesn't want to, make it through the police department, what are their options, and how we've heard in some of our other meetings that some of the citizens are comfortable going to different community members. Would they be able to go to, say, if it's a civilian review board with these complaints and get it reviewed that way? I just wanted to follow the, kind of like how a bill becomes a law type. I need to know the
Mhm.
process.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up because it's funny. I was thinking the same thing. That stage they call reconciliation, or Councilmember Powell. I don't know if you all have any equivalent at the city level, but where something's happening in one house with a bill and then it has to go over to the other one and get approval from them as well. Sometimes it can start over even, right? But the idea is they're working on the same thing. Again, the goal and the thinking was that some of that reconciliation type stuff is supposed to be happening in the next full meeting. But what is great about the way we've structured this is we have present here but two people who are on the other committee. And so, the idea of that cross fertilization can happen to some extent, but it just sounds like you all haven't gotten to that point yet with the ideas where we can say for sure. But I think maybe in that meeting, one of the things that could be part of the job of this group is to express to that group how important that accountability is for this particular topic, right? And how related it is, and maybe help them out with drafting some language for their recommendations that affect our topic. Go ahead, Pastor Blaylock. Oh, you're muted still. Sorry. We can't hear you. Walter, we can't hear you.
Okay, good. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
I think one of the things that would help accountability is that the way that a sergeant or lieutenant would be promoted in the sense of how they deal with, the community of color and the community at large, specifically the community of color. How, they need to be made conscious of the fact that if in fact I got a patrolman out there and I'm going to look at, how he's treating people of color in the sense of, is he writing bogus tickets? Is he racially profiling? Why are you doing this to these particular people? And I don't see you doing that. I don't see the fair share of equity. I don't see you doing other citizens in the community like that. I'm as Ladua said, if you are on a certain area, in a certain area that's predominantly a white, and you patrol in that area, why you're not writing those tickets in that area? Are you saying that those people are straight in the sense of, they don't never run stop sign, they never speed, and I cannot imagine. So those are the kind of things that I think accountability got to start within the rank and file. As I said, your lieutenants, your sergeants, your supervisors. Those people have to be more conscious, more cognizant of the fact that we're not going to allow this to be happening here in Elgin, because we want Elgin to be a community that is very conscious and very aware and sensitive to the fact that, we are not going to inequitably treat anybody that way. So it's going to have to start. So I don't know what, maybe the deputy chief can tell me, what do they do? How do they look at a person who's being promoted? How do they look at the lieutenant? How do they look at the sergeant? How do they look at these people who deal with these patrolmen and deal with this whole thing? Because one of the things, the guy who gave me a ticket, very, very nice gentleman. He said, Pastor Blaylock, I'm sorry. I am out here. It is my job to make sure that people are not having their phones in their hands while they're driving. And it's a state law. Now, my whole question is, and I asked him this question, how many other people did you stop? I should have asked how many people of the non-colored you stopped. I didn't. I meant to ask him that. I was so, when the police stopped me, I'm kind of shaky, kind of nervous, because I don't know, it's not great, when I've been stopped by police, because I don't know what they're thinking, what's going on in their mind. So, but anyway, he was very nice. He said to me, yeah, I've been stopping a lot of people. So I assumed then that he was doing that equity. So, but, that's my assumption, because, he seems to be a nice guy. However, is patrolman or the, well, you get what I'm saying. I'll let him answer it.
Yeah, so we're currently in the promotional process right now for our next sergeant's list, and it's an extensive process. It's inclusive of a review by all supervisors who have contact with the officer who is putting in for promotion, an evaluation. There's a command staff interview process that the officers go through. There's a review of their work history, their evaluations. Everything gets taken into consideration, past discipline. And I spoke to earlier having an early warning system. So we do look at the types of complaints that come in against an officer, the types of use of force, everything comes into play. And I've mentioned it before that monthly there's a random audit of body worn camera video from the officers. So we're pulling up a third of the shift and we're pulling up a random video from an encounter where they had their body worn camera on, they were reviewing that. So it's comprehensive to that regard. Have we had community input? Not at the sergeant and lieutenant level. That is a part of the command process for promotion.
Deputy Chief, can I follow up on that question and kind of another one that feels like it's at the root of things here? Is to what extent is individual officer accountability kind of within the purview of the recommendations that can come out of this group? So, for example, we've seen the overall data about racial profiling in Elgin and from the whole state. Is there some process going on equivalent to that per officer? I mean, I know the randomness part might detect it, but the sense that I'm getting from folks is that that's particularly important to them, is the accountability for those officers whose bias comes through.
Mm-hmm.
And how is that detected?
So on the officer level, again, we have everything's embedded into our policies. We went over the policies in that first meeting. If you want to reference 111.1 profiling discrimination. But when we went over that, a lot of that language is embedded in there, and there's a duty to intervene and a duty to report if an officer knows that another officer's conduct is biased or blatantly biased. It can be articulated. There is a duty for the officers to intervene. There is a duty for the officers to make that report. And that goes to the culture, and that goes to continuing to build and develop the culture that type of stuff is not acceptable in this department, in this profession.
Got it. Thanks. Task Force Member Rivera.
I have a question. The duty to report, are officers always partnered together? Do they ride solo, or do they always ride together for that duty to report?
Officers do ride solo, but oftentimes there's backup. Most calls require two officers. Two officers get sent to most calls. Traffic stops can be the exception. You might do a traffic stop where you don't need a backup. But in general, most often you're going to see two officers on calls.
Task Force Member Horton.
Yes, Deputy Chief. With that duty to report, is it required that the officer being reported knows the other officer's name?
No, the officer can make the report anonymous, but obviously at some point there's going to have to be an investigation that takes place, and then that officer will be involved to some level with that investigation. It really, again, it'll depend on the circumstances.
Thanks.
Deputy Chief, this is Councilwoman Powell. You've been at the police station for a long time. How many instances of duty to intervene can you think of where, those situations have been filed and come to your attention?
I can think of one for sure. Incident where there's a duty to intervene and it was reported by the officers involved, and that particular officer was terminated and criminally charged. So.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, and I think this is something just kind of also thinking about what Charles Horton asked. I think, again, going to culture of the organization and culture of policing, I don't, you said in all the years you've been there, there's been one that you can think of that has come to that has occurred. The culture of policing really doesn't lend itself to other officers snitching on other officers. Let's be real. They're not going to do that. So I don't know. I struggle with the accountability piece. I think that's a big part of it. I think the culture is a big part of it. I'm not for dumping. I'll just be honest. I'm just not for dumping a whole lot of more money down the rabbit hole I mentioned of training, because I think, I don't think it's a training issue. I really don't think it's a training issue. People come into this with a mindset. It's not a training issue. It's a behavioral issue. And Pastor Blaylar can speak to this as with his HR background. I can't control how you think about people, but what I can control is how you treat people and your behavior. So you can think you could think and feel a whole lot of different ways about folks, but in the course of you doing your job, what I can control as your employer, as your supervisor, as your manager, is your actions. And I think to the heart of what we've heard from a lot of folks is people's actions haven't been policed as much or nearly to the point that they probably should have. There's a whole lot of discretion, and people abuse that discretion. And I'll be honest, I'm at a loss in some cases on how do you really get to the core of that? Because there are so many different ways. And I have friends who are police officers in other communities and in this community over the years. There's always some kind of way to get past whatever policy procedure that is put in place. If that's the intent, then that is what will happen. So even the policy that we talked about from Philadelphia, preventing officers from pulling folks over for low-level offenses. Are we just going to run into the issue of that they're going to find some other reason to pull people over and profile them some other kind of way? I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I'm just expressing the same frustration that I've heard repeatedly from folks in this community, the same frustration that I have as a Black woman in this community, raising a Black son in this community who's about to start driving. That these are real issues, and I don't know how we can effectively get to the heart of something that I believe is very much inbred in the culture of policing, not just in Elgin, but just the culture of policing, period. And that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Council Member. Pastor Blaylock.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what Councilman Powell said. One of the questions I want to ask is maybe kind of a little bit off, but and maybe the deputy chief can really help with this, just for my FYI, the deputy chief, so I can know how to tell my parishioners or anybody who's been stopped by the police. Because normally when we are stopped for maybe a minor traffic violation or something like that, we get other officers or other patrol come by checking. So when they, okay, if they stop me or stop anybody, do everybody hear that? You know, who hears that? Just on my FYI.
Yeah, so we dispatch what we call Channel 1, and that's all primary radio traffic for the Elgin Police Department. We don't share our police channel with any other agencies. So everything gets dispatched on Channel 1 unless there's a critical incident happening or something, and that might go to a different channel. So yes, when somebody makes a traffic stop, they call it out on Channel 1, their location, the vehicle type, the vehicle plate, and everyone who's working knows that that officer's on that stop at that location.
And do other police officers just come checking or what? What are they just checking to make sure that everything is copacetic or what, you know?
Yeah, again, as I mentioned before, we try to have a couple officers on every call. So you may have an officer who's in the area who starts going that direction just to make sure the officer's okay. If you ever see an officer giving the thumbs up to a passing squad car and the squad car gives the thumbs up, that means, hey, we're all good here. Nothing to worry about, and you can move on to your next call.
Just for my FYI, just want to know.
So what I'm hearing is this has been a great discussion, by the way, and I'm glad kind of the way I framed this triggered some of the comments to come out, because I don't think we've actually had the conversation explicitly about accountability in the way we just had it. We've touched on it, but clearly I'm hearing it's something that this group wants to address or try to address in its recommendations.
Can I say something, Joe? I'm sorry,
Sure.
not
No problem.
raising my hand, but I really want to appreciate Councilman Powell because I feel the same way. It is a culture, and I'm almost like I really don't know what to say, and she really expressed my sentiment very, very well and articulated very, very well. Because it's a culture, and I mean, Deputy Chief did say it too. I appreciate him being candid too and saying it is a culture and they're trying to deal with it, and it is. It's very insidious, almost institutionalized, and so it really is. And when I look at, and just may say this, Joe, and I'll be quiet. When I saw the young man up in New Jersey in the mall, when they was fighting, a black student, white student was a teenager, they were fighting, and looked like the white student was really getting the best. I mean, just fist fight, and it looked like he was really getting the best. He had this guy on the bench, he was welling on him. But the police, when they come up, the mall police, when they come up, they grab the black guy, the black teenagers from under this guy and held him down, with their neck, with their knee on his back, and I'm saying after post George Floyd, come on. And the white teenager, you can tell that he was like, he had his hands up like, okay, we both fighting, but put him in handcuffs too. And they didn't. They let him go on his way. So it's like Councilman Powell said, it's a culture. And it's really a culture, like, and I hate to say it, Deputy Chief, but it look like a culture is it's a war against people of color from the police department. I hope that's not true. But I hear that a lot from many of our people in the community saying that, and I just hope it's not. I tell them no, it's not. But I just wanted to say that. I wanted to appreciate her for saying what I feel too, and don't know how to really, I don't know, Joe, what recommendation that we can do besides accountability and asking. But it's going to really have to come from people in the police department who want to say, hey, we got to do better. We can do better. We can act professionally to everybody. And it was stopped. It was stopped, with a heartbeat.
Just respond to that just real quick with two things. Number one, it's probably, we're talking about a longer term for any strategy to be effective with culture. And number two, it's definitely not going to be one. There's not going to be a magic bullet or clear thing. As appealing as the Philadelphia thing sounds, and we heard in the research from two good sources, people saying one way to do it is to reduce stops overall. Okay, you could try to do that too, right? But those things alone aren't going to change culture overnight, and not necessarily change it overnight. Go ahead, Jewel. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of what Tish said as a Black mother as well. It's the most horrifying and scariest thing that you can go through when your kids get stopped or pulled over, and have to deal with a police officer as well as my husband, and I have, a long time ago, I haven't been stopped in years, but I know just when the police come, I get scared. It really is because you don't know, because we have seen things that seem to be so simple, but they've gone totally awry, so, you can't, I don't know why people can't seem to understand of what we're saying in regards to, what I've been taught, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But this is the thing. Nothing's happening to other people. And I hate to say it, like I said, I have plenty of white friends. This does not happen to. They do not have these concerns whatsoever. And when they hear me talking to things, they're looking at me going, what are you talking about? And it's the truth, for years, I just kind of give you a little short story. For years, I stayed next door to a police officer and was scared deathly of him. But he turned out to be the most awesome, gentleman, him and his wife, just sweethearts to us. True. But we stayed next door to him and we got to know him. More or less, he got to know us. And there were times that, my son worked at AMC Theaters. He was a police officer out in Barrington. He would bring him home when he would get off his job. He would actually ride through, pick him up because he was getting off. So it's not a matter that I have either a hatred or whatever there is for police officers, because, and just being honest, bless his heart that he showed us a different side. So we were able to see, but he also came and sat down and talked with us, and we told him of things that we had experienced, especially my son in his early years. I could not understand why, even my brothers, like I said, I don't know if because I'm a female that I don't get targeted as much. I don't know what that is, but all of my brothers, I got 3 of them, and my son, all of them have been targeted and hit by police. And I just don't understand it. Now, I ain't gonna say they've been perfect all the time. I'm not saying that. But on the other end, a lot of things that they've gotten a lot of tickets constantly over and over and over and over again. My thought that I was kind of saying, being honest with you, is this the way the city is taking and getting some monies that they were not getting because people don't want to pay their taxes? So they're making up the money on Black and brown backs. Is that what they're doing? I don't know, but I do know we're hit extremely hard, so.
Joe, if I could real quick,
Yeah.
Councilwoman Powell and then Pastor Blaylark, when I talk about culture, I'm talking about what we've been doing here, what we've been trying to get ourselves involved in, the culture of honor that Detective Rouse and community outreach specialist Bob Witt is doing, having conversations internally. We were talking about implicit bias. We've been doing implicit bias since 2017. This isn't something we just started post George Floyd. So when I talk about culture, it's also the recruiting, the diversity in our recruiting. It's, to your point, it's not going to be a one-stop shop. It's not going to happen overnight, but these are things that we've been implementing over the course of the last 4 or 5 years that continue. And community policing has always been in the fabric of what we've been doing. And we've been out in the community. It's walking talks in the neighborhoods, various community initiatives. So I just, when I talk about culture, I'm not saying I'm trying to change a negative culture here. We're trying to establish or build on a good culture here.
Thank you. So, Pastor Blaylock, and
Yeah, let me
is that
just.
an old hand or a new hand? That's a new hand? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a new hand. I just want to say that I think that when people hear us talking, and I have opportunity to engage with many police officers, and and I think that, and I want to really convey this to Deputy Chief, just like he just said about starting the culture. Most African American, most Latino people, we are not saying, and I think I can speak for both groups, we're not saying that we don't want police officers to do their job. We're not saying that. We want them to arrest the bad guy. Black, white, blue, green. I often say this to police officers when I see them in Chicago, when they, and I'm asking them this, if you're going to shoot somebody, please shoot those people who shoot at us. I mean, the black people in our black community shoot at us, shoot at them. And we don't get that. That's my point. We are not trying to tell the police not to do their job. We're trying to tell them to do their job, but we're just saying, do it professionally and do it, equitably across the board. But for sure, we're not trying to stop police from doing their job. We want to see police. If I call the police, I want to see them in my community. I want to see them if somebody's burglarizing my community. That happened a few years ago. Somebody thought that one of my neighbors thought somebody was breaking in my house. And I had about 10 police officers come there, and they searched around, and they even wanted to come into my house. And I told them, come on in, please. They wanted to search my basement to make sure, a burglar was not there. Awesome job. And I commended them for that. So please, and that's one thing I'm gonna tell the whole entire task force. We're not saying we don't want police officers to do their job. We do. We're paying them for that. We do want them to do it. We want them to serve and protect. But please don't forget, the least of these. Please don't forget us.
I hear you. I appreciate what you're saying. I hear you. I understand. I know at the end of the day, we want equitable policing for everyone, fair policing for everyone. I just felt I had to emphasize that I'm very proud of our department and what we're doing in our department to strengthen the culture that we're building here and the efforts that everybody throughout the department is making. When I talked to you a couple of meetings ago about the 21-day challenge and the books, and I know we need to push that out in greater groups of people. I heard you when you said that. We need to not just, like I said, it started organically, but we need to get this out there a little bit more. I think the chief has talked about getting people from the task force to come in and meet with officers. To LaJule's point, once you know someone, or once you have the ability to build that relationship, conversations become a lot easier. Understanding becomes a lot easier. So that's the culture I'm talking about. And I just wanted to make sure people understood. I'm not talking about trying to fix anything. I'm talking about trying to build better with what we're doing.
Thank you, Deputy.
And Chief, that one of my favorite programs, and I always, and I do appreciate everything that you just said. One of my favorite programs, and I've said this publicly, is our ROPE program, where our officers are living in neighborhoods, because those are the situations where, just like Kelly said, they're living next door to people and getting to know folks. Bye, baby. And that's when those relationships begin to develop. And that's when you get to know folks, and people begin to trust you, and those barriers start to break down on both sides.
100%.
And that's, I think, one of our greatest strengths in our community policing program, the success of our rope programs, because, you know, we've seen crime and problems in some of those areas reduced to the point where we no longer need to have rope officers in those communities, in those neighborhoods. And that's a success story. But it gets to the point of the relationships, just like Kelly said, you know, the relationship she developed with her neighbor who was a police officer, you know, to be able to magnify that across the board is very valuable.
Thank you, council member. I want to let Cynthia say her comment, and then I'll get us back kind of to the recommendations here.
Thank you. Briefly, yes, just what Tish and Walter said, you guys are doing such a great job with that community engagement, and we appreciate it greatly. I could see the progress and just how it is building that trust. You know, we could see the blue uniform, but you could see the heart as well within the police. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And I know with COVID and the pandemic, because I wanted to schedule a ride along, or, you know, we want to connect. So I don't know if those are available now or if it's on hold, but I just kind of waited because I just want to make sure it's still okay to do that.
So I think to that point, and then Deputy Schussler, you can respond too. I know that you offered and Chief Lally have offered to have officers come and talk to this group, and we kind of went back and forth about the nature of that and how best to do it. So I believe Larry is in the process of scheduling in small groups, maybe groups of two and two. I don't know exactly what the configuration is, but small group meetings with task force members and officers, just small group conversations. Go ahead, Deputy Schussler, and then LaJewel.
Yeah, so currently, we don't have the ride-alongs going, but we do hope to get those implemented soon here. We're about to move away from masks statewide. We have to reevaluate how we're going to do this with vaccination status, and people are going to be comfortable riding with officers vaccinated and how that works. But in the near future, I hope to have we'll have some information out there, and we'll be doing that program again.
Excellent, thank you.
Yes, LaJewel.
And I do want to make one note. Like I did say that I lived next door to that police officer. That was his home. So I think the other thing that we need to make sure that our police officers are coming from Elgin, from our community, you know, and not outside. Because if we're doing all this work and they're coming from other places, then it's going to be hard to actually get them set up to understand how our community is actually, what we're actually doing, what's important to us, you know. So hopefully that's what we're also, you know, wanting to, I don't want to move forward to, or make sure that that's in importance, a major thing, that we have to have our police officers here in Elgin, hopefully born and raised or moved here, and you're living here for a long amount of time, and, you know, have taken on the Elgin culture of what we're trying to do here. That's of great importance to me as well. Okay.
Got it. Thank you, LaJewel. So I'd like to make a proposal to this group. So as I had mentioned, I believe the next full task force meeting, the idea was that each of the subcommittees would sort of present to the full group and engage. There'd be time to engage in a conversation about wherever they are on the recommendation sort of schedule or in the development of the recommendations. So first thing I'd like to do is ask somebody from this group to lead that conversation. Now, you may not know yet what you're leading it on, but I did make some suggestions, and I think I want to revisit how I was framing things based off how this conversation went. I think clearly we need an explicit accountability related recommendation, maybe something that wraps up accountability and culture together. the comments that folks have made have weighed heavily on me. I hear you all in um, the frustration. That's not even the right word, but just the feeling like there's just kind of a lack of ideas out there on how to affirmatively address this issue of reducing racial profiling and getting bias out of the picture in policing. And so I think what I'm going to do is share with you all kind of a menu of different things that any one of them could turn into a recommendation. My approach had been to try to like gather some things we had said and like kind of put them together. And we had talked a little bit about training, but training isn't the right frame, clearly. I think we need a different frame for those ideas. So when we don't have specific ideas yet, there's a couple different ways we could go about it. I could just suggest a whole lot of things and you all could say, I like this, I like that. And then we could work from that list and tweak them. Or I could do what I was trying to do here, just give some broad framings. And if those framings resonate with you all, then we populate in under those framings specific ideas that make sense to achieve what that frame is. Now I'm going to just do both. I think because I think one of the framings was off. And so I'll just go back to ideas around accountability, ideas around culture, maybe take a look back in the material around specific things to address that, because that's not necessarily the framing that I took when I was looking and reading. I do think, though, that we have the seeds of some really great ideas that are specific enough that could become recommendations. But you all would still want to have a deliberation on those ideas and the exact language in those ideas, right? Even LaJewel, how you reacted to the ideas around reducing the barriers and the impacts of stops on African American communities. What you were hearing from the things that I put on the slide did not connect with what you were seeing in that way. So I'll take another stab at that. I will share that back with you all prior to the meeting, the full task force meeting, because on the cycle that we're on, unless we have a meeting on next Monday, the full task force meeting will be the following Thursday. So, I'll kind of leave that up to you all in terms of how you all want to approach that. Do you want to try to squeeze in a meeting on Monday, or would you rather, is it more important to just hold off on another conversation amongst ourselves until we've had a meeting with the full task force? How do people feel about that?
When is the meeting with the full task force, you said?
I believe it is the week after next, and I'm going to struggle to pull up my calendar while
That would be the 3rd of March.
No, my bad.
If that's
Yes.
the case, I
Yeah.
would be in Atlanta. I won't be around
For that meeting.
But yeah, unless I can get on, I may be able to get on Zoom down there. According to what my schedule is going, I'm just going to really just to
Okay.
to visit my son, so I may be able to get on Zoom. So that's no problem. But anyway, I would like to just listen. However, I think we got enough. I think we talking about accountability. I think when we talking about, the way that stops are done. Also, some of the culture, some of the things that we're talking about in accountability and with with the rank and file themselves. I think there's a whole lot of things that we can put together. I think it's going to, as you said, it's not a pill, it's a process. So therefore, we can begin to start the process with these seeds that we have. So there's a lot of things that we can do, and I think you can put some of the things together. And we'll look at it. Without maybe meeting, but we'd like to meet next Monday. We just need to get somebody to volunteer to be at City Hall.
Right. So are people feeling like squeezing in another meeting before to get some clarity on something to present to the full group would be worth it? Okay. So I'm going to try to make that happen. And I'll communicate back to you all about this proposal. Deputy Chief Schuessler, would that fit your schedule?
I'm actually out of the office next week.
Okay.
I talked to the chief. I don't know her availability. I know she's teaching a class. I'll be gone the entire week next week.
Okay. We'll keep that in mind too. So, and Pastor Blaylock, you're on Monday though. Are you around?
Yeah, I'm around Monday. I'm around
And
Monday, but I'm
everybody
leaving
else,
that
your
Wednesday.
schedules next Monday? Okay. Councilmember Powell won't be around. Okay. So I'll just have to communicate. We do have, of course, on our schedule on the recurring cycle of every other Monday, the date of March 7th, right, for our next meeting, regardless of what happens with trying to get a meeting for next Monday, or either be next Monday and the Monday after, or not next Monday, but the Monday after for sure.
Don't we have enough? Well, Cynthia got her hands up. I think we got enough for you could just, to pass it on to us. If we need to comment on it, we will.
Okay, so
have our regular meeting that's 7th.
Yeah, it may be better to, Plus, there's another angle to it too, which is having that presentation and that discussion with the full task force will inform our ideas, maybe to a point, especially around accountability. We can kind of get on the same page with the Civilian Review Board, Civilian Review Board Subcommittee, and frame what we need to frame in a way consistent with them. Go ahead, Cynthia.
I just wanted to say that I could be at City Hall next Monday if we do have to have the meeting.
That would be,
I'll take my time.
Okay. All right. If we can get enough of us to commit to being present on Monday, I think it would be worth it. But if we don't have to, so I won't want to also force it if several people are not going to be there. So I'll communicate. Sorry to be vague with folks, but I'm going with the flow here a little bit. I'll communicate on this with an email just to confirm who can be there next Monday. I'll also reframe these ideas a little bit, but keeping the ones intact that we kind of had some positive reactions to. And I'll ask you all to provide any tweaks or feedback on that. And then also in my email, I will be asking for a volunteer to kind of lead the discussion, the report out is what the best word is, from this subcommittee to the full subcommittee. So I don't know if people can volunteer for that role now. If anyone is interested in playing that role. I know it's weird because you don't know what you're presenting on yet, but at some point I'll have a list for you to talk about. Anyone want to volunteer for that? No, not yet. Okay. I'll bug you an email for it.
Volunteer for what?
To present to the full, to be the spokesperson basically for.
Me and June already doing some things, so I think that Cynthia should be doing fine. I draft her me and LaJude already, we do things for the whole full task force.
Yeah.
So
I was going to
would be a
nominate
good person.
Charles. I want to hear from
One of
Charles.
them. One of them.
One of us. All
One
right,
of them?
we'll flip a coin.
Yeah,
Rock, paper,
one of you
scissors, or
guys.
something.
Okay, well, if nobody's ready yet, I'll nudge you via email. Trust me, we'll stay on it. We'll get our spokesperson for that meeting no matter what. Great conversation. Thank you all. Can I get a motion to close the meeting? I guess we have to do this the proper way.
So move.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, and I
Second.
heard a second. Okay, and just a quick vote. All those in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
I.
Any nays? No nays. The ayes have it. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank
Great meeting. I have
Good
so much
night.
to work with. Thank you all.
Good night,
you.
everybody.
Thank you. Good night. Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good night.
Tell Sheila Brown good night.
Yeah.
Good night, Walter. Good night,
Say good night.
everyone.
Good night, Sheila.
Aye.
Good night, Tish. Cynthia,
Night.
Joe.